and welcome to Deep Dive with Jamie Stein, where we take a deep dive look at all things reality TV, pop culture, and the world at large. I'm an intuitive and an empath, which means I pick up on the thoughts, feelings, and energy percolating in other people and the world around me. I believe there is meaning waiting to be found at every turn if you're willing to see it. So join me as we dismantle everything from trash TV to high spiritual concepts and learn more about ourselves, each other, and how we're all connected. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive with Jamie Stein. Feeling excited about today because we're going to dive in a little bit into the season finale of Vanderpump Rules, season 11. Not an unscheduled episode. I had planned on recording today, but a little bit of what we might call a last-minute improvisational episode because I didn't necessarily plan on talking specifically about the finale, but once I saw the finale, it just felt like there was so much going on so many different levels. Certainly the personal level, what was happening amongst the cast members, and I think the ways in which the episode paid off certain themes that we've been exploring for a minute now on the podcast. But then also it just felt like there was this whole meta level about essentially what constitutes reality TV, what we're even watching, this whole notion of what we / the cast expect of cast members, what it means to be having, I think, what they call honest, difficult conversations on camera. Just what is even the line between an uncomfortable, honest conversation versus what we might call a staged conversation that has the face of being an uncomfortable, honest conversation for the sake of the camera. So there's just a lot here, and I don't want to, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself before jumping in. So having said all that, I knew I needed someone who could go into deep intuitive waters with me quickly. So I called on old friend of the podcast, Molly Durand, who was here recently helping me navigate all this. I knew she would have a lot of interesting thoughts that could get us going. So please welcome back to the deep dive, Molly Durand. Hi, Molly.
Hello. So happy to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And thank you for agreeing to do this a little bit last minute, as they say. All right. Without further ado, let's jump in. I mean, my impulse, honestly, like I said, I'm kind of all over the place and there's so much here to unpack and I don't even really know where to begin. So I'm just kind of curious if I just bunted the ball to you, having recently just rewatched it, where are you in terms of this finale? What is most sticking out to you? What is drawing your attention? Yeah, where are you in relationship to all this?
Okay, so like I said, I watched the thing and then I just was like, what was that? When I rewatched some of it today, and this is the finale, right? Not the reunion. I was struck by a couple things. Sheena reminds me of a child actor, her level of response to everything. I feel like I can see her as a 4-year-old girl who's just like, but it's all about optics. It's all about fear of optics. Like, I'm afraid of how I'll be perceived. That seems to be like a dominant. Lala, I'm going to try here, but like, I feel like she's like a producer of the show. And I feel like she and her narrative is very much like serving, I guess, what like a producer would want to think. I still feel like I don't know anything about her, how she feels, but I certainly know her critique and opinion of everybody else. And I also see her desire to grow and I see her willingness to be more self-reflective and I see her growth and I love them all. Let's be honest, I really actually do. But she felt to be the arbiter of right and wrong this season, and that just started to become really agitating to me. James was the most stable character this season, which tells you something. And Ariana, it was funny to me that everyone's making it a big deal for her to walk out. It's like, if it's a reality show, and then this conversation, and I would love to hear your viewpoint on this constant conversation of like, who's bringing more reality to a reality show? This seems to be like a theme in a couple other shows as well. Like, I brought more of my truth than you did. And it's like this fight of like, they tell us we have to be real. It's a part of the job and da-da-da-da-da. And they're all like sort of pointing at each other who's more real. I don't know Lala. Like, I don't feel like I know her at all. So I always think it's funny when she says that, because I feel like I actually don't know her. And I don't think she's that in tune with her own emotions. I think it's easier for her to know how she feels if she can project it outward and then have a response. But why was it such a big deal for Ariana to leave when we knew that's what she would do? Why was that like a dramatic ending? Like, the way that Ariana was crucified for leaving felt inauthentic to me. I just felt like the storyline, and then Lala narrating at the end with the montage, like as if she was a producer, seemed like they were trying to write a narrative very specifically against like Ariana not being as participant as everybody else. And I just thought that was really telling. And why does Sheena keep bringing this to Ariana? That was weird to me. Like, and why is Sheena like talking to Sam about it right after, like Sandoval right after she was just with Ariana? They had an amends. Then she talks to Sandoval right after, and she's like, she was very flippant about Ariana, which felt weird to me.
Oh boy, yeah. I mean, I really felt like this finale, and really the whole season, when I think about it, more than ever, Vanderpump Rules was about being a TV show. I just felt like the whole season we've been watching is the mechanics of being on a TV show, and the way in which this show has essentially become the livelihood, which then I think also leads into the lives of these, I'm calling them characters. They're real people, right? I mean, this is the catch-22. They're characters on a show, but they're real people. They're real lives that are being used for dramatic content. And much to Lala's point at the end, they've been doing this for a long time. You know, Lisa Vanderpump roped these. I'm betraying and revealing my own bias when it comes to Lisa Vanderpump, but I'll just say the language that wants to come through me. You know, she roped these impressionable kids in a way into this vortex of fame, a certain type of success, money, and all the trappings that come with it. And I feel like, I mean, this is a much bigger conversation that I'll save for a later day, but I feel like, yes, they got sort of lured into something where their lives became inextricably linked with the show. And I think for a lot of them, it feels dependent on the show. And so, yeah, I think this season for me, really big picture, was watching in a way this isn't reflective of my point of view of how I see them. It's more almost like Lisa Vanderpump's point of view, or even production at large's point of view. The animals have outgrown their cages, and the premise is no longer sustainable, right? And I just felt like that was playing out so hardcore all season. And then in particular in the finale, where we finally have this debate that is essentially the whole lot of them, I think, having a debate about the nature of reality TV. And again, what's expected of them, what their job requires, what they're doing. And then what I get so curious about from Jamie's perspective, and you started bringing this in, is just that line between what is real for them, what is for the sake of TV, and are those two things even different at this point? So, I mean, look, there's so much that you said, and I feel this impulse to slow this down and to maybe just pick, one or two threads to focus on. Before I do that, I think the last big picture thing I'll say is, I just keep thinking back to how Katie and Ariana left, and then the rest of them were left in that VIP area fighting amongst themselves. And I really felt like what I was watching was, in a way, Ariana and Katie breaking out of the Matrix. Like they had just swallowed the red pill, and we were watching them say no and leave. And they kind of left the rest of the cast behind in the Matrix. And they're still fully, like, their blinders are on. They're believing every false surface of the Matrix, and like I said, debating amongst themselves what it means to be a good reality TV show participant. And it really felt like that to me, like watching two people kind of, it's the moment, and if we go back to the actual movie The Matrix, where Keanu Reeves takes that pill and then he sort of wakes up and sees that what he's been experiencing as the real world isn't actually the real world, and actually the real world is this sort of apocalyptic, nightmarish world that's run by AI, and he's in like a pod with slime on him. And then the rest of them, Lala, Sheena, the two Toms, they're just left in the false real world, still believing the lies of the false real world. So, and I'm really interested in that as a metaphor. What I was really drawn to certainly was your description of Sheena. She and Tom feel very, if this were like a play or a movie or a book, Sheena and Tom feel very thematically connected to me in the sense that they both feel fully indoctrinated in this matrix. And I was so drawn to that final one-on-one they had at that table after Ariana walked off, because I felt like I was watching these two slaves to the Matrix navigate something together. And I did drop in a little, actually into both of them around that. And maybe I'll get into that in a moment. But just to respond directly to what you said, I agree with you that optics, AKA how this is going to play to the audience, aka we're on a reality show and we want this show to keep going, is a huge part of what's going on. And I will say, when I dropped into Sheena, actually towards Ariana, so you brought in how Sheena keeps going in for the kill with Ariana, which, yes, I mean, every time she does it, I'm going out of my skin just saying to myself, Sheena, what the fuck do you want from her? Drop it. By the way, what's coming to me as I say this is I do feel this thematic connection between Sheena and Sandoval.
Yes.
Isn't it interesting that they're both the ones who there's like an energetic similarity to the way they keep trying to insert themselves into Ariana's space. I was dying when when he went over to introduce himself to Dan, and then when he went over to insert himself in the Sheena Ariana conversation, I had so much secondhand embarrassment for him that I literally had to pause the TV. I almost couldn't even bring myself to watch it because he's so tone deaf. I mean, that's the most generous way of saying it. He's also completely disrespectful of Ariana's stated boundaries, but it's so cringeworthy to me. But they both do it, right? And so I was dropping into Sheena towards Ariana around like, what's going on here with you towards Ariana? Why do you keep going in for some sort of validation of what you're doing that I don't think you're ever going to get? And yeah, a huge part of it really was, it did strike me on a certain level as I want permission from you to go back towards this friendship. And I felt that, and this is where I say, like, I think for Sheena, this is both about real feelings and it's about the show. And I think those two things are connected, meaning I do think there is a place where she genuinely cares about Sandoval. I actually have more to say about that. I'll see if it makes sense to go into that now, or I'll save it for later. But I do think there's a place where she actually genuinely cares about him. I do think there's a place where she actually she cares about this friendship, and there's a part of her that wants to go back into it. And I also think there's a place in her that knows, for the sake of the show, he needs to be integrated back into it. And so there's a way in which the cast needs to give him grace. And I also believe she is scared about alienating Ariana, both as a friend who she cares about, which again, I believe she does care about Ariana as a friend.
Yeah.
And I think she's also very aware, much like Lala was saying on the reunion, Ariana's a fan favorite. And what's it going to look like if I welcome Tom back into the mix? Is Ariana going to be pissed at me? And also, is the audience going to be pissed at me? So I think for Sheena, the reason why she keeps going in, to your point, I think there's a lot of fear and anxiety there, which I think lives in Sheena no matter what, if she's on Vanderpump Rules, if she's not on Vanderpump Rules, but she's on Vanderpump Rules. And what I really hear from her in all of this is, Ariana, give me permission to do this. So yeah, I have what's the expression? Like, I have a pass to do this. And no one can get mad at me. You won't get mad at me. The producers won't get mad at me. The audience won't get mad at me. But it is this feeling in her, kind of like Ariana sort of holds the golden key to me being able to do this thing that I want to do. And I want to get that permission. So I'm going to keep bringing it up until I get the permission.
Right there, what you just said, I feel like is the resentment that a lot of people had. A lot of people, like, especially Lala at the end, she's like, who's Beyonce after they're getting cheated on? It's like they're so resentful that, like, this woman got, like, slaughtered and then loved. And that really played on people's psyche in this show, because they've all felt like they've been betrayed, but not necessarily uplifted into livelihood. And you mentioned something really important. You said their real life is their livelihood. And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. When it comes to, like, what I was going to say that I forgot was, like, whenever Ariana was setting a boundary or responding to Sheena or telling people her opinion of Sandoval, even though she was firm and strong, she was basically what I was hearing her say was, I'm brokenhearted. He broke my heart. He broke my heart. He broke my heart. Do you not see it? He broke my heart. But because she said it in a firm boundary, people do not like boundaries. Let's be honest. Like, they don't like them. And so when she would say in a firm, strong way, this is my boundary, that sort of, and she had success, that rubbed people the wrong way. And they're like, well, if the God that we all worship is whoever's popular each season, which, by the way, some seasons it was Sandoval. If the God that we worship is now Ariana, there will always be resentment towards that. Like, Sheena literally FaceTimed Vanderpump, Lisa, and said, not only asking Ariana, but she was asking Vanderpump, is this okay? I talked to him. Is it okay? like her identity is very much waved by, like, she's in the wind, sort of like by how she will be perceived, because she showed at such a young age. And she hasn't been a favorite, as she has said many times. And so, like, I'm just curious what actually motivates her. Is it to be loved? I used to say she was a slave of the coin. I don't know. I'm just curious, like, what actually motivates Sheena's behavior? Because I think she's unconscious. I don't think she's aware of what motivates her behavior.
There's a couple things I want to say about Ariana. I want to say, and I'm interested in my own response to her in the specific episode. I want to say, just in terms of broader context, I was thrilled by her boundaries this episode. I found it thrilling. It's like, in terms of when she really stood up to that producer and was owning her anger and her boundary in such a clear, direct way, and then explaining her thought process in the interviews in such a clear, direct way. There was something to me that, like I said, it was thrilling, it was powerful, it was empowering. And, the irony, of course, is that everyone was so disappointed in her because she felt that they were robbing the cast of a quote unquote satisfying finale as dictated by the rules of reality TV. Now, there was no way for them to know the show was going to break the fourth wall in the way that they did. But I just think it's so interesting that in honoring that no, in this particular instance, in such a clear, strong way, she actually, I feel like, ended up facilitating one of the most compelling, portions of reality TV that I've seen in a long time. So I just want to be clear. I was so supportive of everything that Ariana was doing. And I also want to say, as long as I'm kind of like spitballing here, I do think it's really interesting that that was on the heels of her essentially, I want to say, finally giving Sheena the permission that she wanted in that final scene where, she really, and again, there was such a clarity finally, because I think it was with you, right? Where I was saying, I don't fully understand Ariana's boundaries at the beginning of the season. It felt murky to me. That scene with Sheena, I really felt like there was something so clear coming through where, the way that I interpret it was basically, look, Sheena, you go do whatever you need to do in terms of Sandoval. Like, be well, know that I love you, I'm here. And then she was also clear, I don't want to hear about it. Essentially, stop coming to me with this. I don't need to hear about his progress. So that was a very clear boundary. And I felt like something both softened in terms of, what before I was calling the preemptive boundary, which to me kind of felt like this control mechanism of, I kind of want to try to maneuver the pieces in the way that feels right to me. And if you talk to him, you're kind of out. But again, as I explored in a previous episode, it was almost like she knew, because she was on this show, she couldn't fully have that clean, clear ultimatum. So that's why I experienced it in the first half of the season as kind of this muddy middle ground where she was saying, yeah, I get it. You'll hang out with him, be cordial with him. That's fine. But I forget. This is the thing. I can't even articulate it now. Like, I never quite knew what she was saying. There was something in there where she was saying, but if you get too close, then you're out. But regardless, the point being, I feel like by the end, by this finale, she arrived at this place of clarity, which is like, look, I'm not going to try to control your behavior. I'm not giving you an ultimatum. I love you.
Right.
This is my boundary. I don't want to hear about it. Go and be well. And to me, I don't know, it just feels energetically connected somehow that her finally arriving at what I would call, at least in terms of the season, this place of closure, then also sort of facilitated something that felt so powerful in those final minutes, in that kind of meta way of her kind of just saying no to the show. because you talked about her boundary, right? And we're talking about this in terms of like the meta conversation of a TV show. And I feel like what the finale made clear to me by the end was, oh, at least this is my suspicion. It's like Ariana didn't really want to come back. I feel like if Ariana had $1 million in her bank account at the start of the season, she probably wouldn't have come back. Or if she knew like, hey, everything's going to work out and you'll still have opportunities and you're going to be financially okay, I feel like her honest truth would have been like, I don't want to be anywhere near Sandoval. I am out of this fucking mess. Now, having said that, I don't think she had that certainty. You know, I think the rug was pulled out from under her feet. She's saying she was in a financially precarious place. I'm sure she also was experiencing a sense of, I don't want Tom taking the show away from me. So it's like she goes back into it. And I feel like on some level, what we were watching was her trying to navigate an experience that maybe she didn't really even want to be fully showing up for, but doing it in the best way that she knew how, which to me kind of meant, like I said, sort of like a murky territory around what the boundaries actually were. Now, having said all that, and again, I want to be clear, I'm saying this as someone who feels very supportive of Ariana and very supportive, again, of like the direct, clean, clear, empowered boundary. But I want to say I can understand. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm saying I can understand and empathize what it might be like to have been a coworker / co-star / friend of hers for several years, watching her, first of all, defend Tom, enable Tom, protect Tom, all those things. But also, as we've explored before, there's always a certain relationship she's had to control. There's always a certain relationship she's had to only revealing what she wants to reveal. There's been a lot of talk about this now that they weren't forthright about what was really going on in their relationship. Again, she wrote narratives to protect Tom, pretending like they didn't have these big arguments when they really did have these big arguments, you know, at like public places where people saw what was really going on. Like she does have this relationship in the past to keeping her cards close to her vest and then like collecting the paycheck, exercising control, all these things. So I can kind of empathize, again, not agree with, but empathize with what it must be like to be a cast member who sees her then get cheated on Scandival, get put on a pedestal. We all rally around her, as we explored before. You know, we have our own investments in this. It serves us as much as it serves her, right, to rally around her. But we're expecting something on the other side. We're playing ball with you now. We want you to play ball with us on the other side. And so then if they perceive her coming back to the show in the wake of Scandival and kind of still doing what she's always done, which is keeping her cards close to her vest, sort of dictating the terms of when and how she'll participate, not playing reality ball in the same way that she's always sort of not played reality ball, but now being elevated, put on a pedestal, collecting all the checks. And they're in this place of fear of like, what the fuck is this going to mean for the show? Like, you're going to go off and be fine. We're the ones who are going to be like, we don't have the benefit of like all the public favor from Scandival. I can empathize with a resentment that might be there from their end of like, when do you actually engage and play ball? And why are you always better than the rest of us? And how does this keep fucking working out for you like this? Which, by the way, I really hear that from Tom Sandoval, and I have more to say about that later, but let me check in with you.
Go on this journey with me, if you will, because in order for me to answer that, I'd have to dissect a few of my own like beliefs and how it all. So it's funny. It's reminding me of the 90s, which is back in style again. This, and even like go with me here, and the Kendrick Lamar and Drake beef that's going on is essentially commercialism versus consciousness. You know, Kendrick's more of a conscious rapper. Drake is more commercial. And I feel like that conversation is happening all over the world and within the show, which is what I remember because I'm a teen of the 90s. So I remember like, this is more real than that, which feels very much like an adolescent argument. Like, what's more authentic? This artist is more authentic than this artist, and this person's more real than that. And whenever there's an argument about who's being more real, I find that confusion is usually the only outcome, because it's all based on people's perception of their own reality. We're watching a reality show, but what struck me about what you were just talking about, and really at the end, was that they're all in their own reality of what's right and wrong based off of their own experiences. So it's really hard to have like a black and white barometer in an era where we're getting binary and we're not really living in that world. And that's why everything's really shifting. So it's like, yeah, you can look back and say that she was not real here, but then talked about her vagina at one point, and then she wasn't real with Tom, but then we'd see her crying in a cafe with him. So it's like, I feel like people and our expectation of reality stars is also something that we should all look at, because the journey that we are all on is like, I can't be only in hindsight can I see why everything had to happen and in order for my healing journey to occur. And we're watching this all go down 3 months out, depending on production, but essentially in real time. But it's not real time. Like, we're watching Ariana. I was struck too when, she was so fair with Sheena at the end. And then they sort of bounced back to cutaways of when she was more rigid in the beginning. And I was first, well, yeah, I guess that's hypocrisy. I guess she changed her mind. And it's like, will we allow people to evolve? Will we allow people to change their mind? I know after a brutal breakup of somebody that I was with for 10 years, I'm going to be maybe rigid and staunch in the first couple months of that. And I'm going to slowly soften. And I'm sure she's going to continue to soften. And are we willing to allow her to have that process on her timeline? Or are we as the audience demanding a timeline that suits us, which speaks to the whole point of what you're talking about? Is reality TV real? Yes and no, right? It's the debate that we're having in the world right now, like commercialism versus authenticity. In fact, so much a thing that's happening in social media and in the world is that people's business models are now being taught to be authentic in order to sell. We're in a very interesting time. And I think that this show and the breakdown of what's happening in the last scene of this show is really a mirror of, this is why you do this show, Jamie. This is why you created this, because these are not just silly little reality stars doing silly little shows. These are mirrors of what's going on in the collective. And what's going on in the collective right now is everybody's trying to fight for who's more authentic, and that they feel that they've been cheated out of them being vulnerable and somebody else not being vulnerable enough. And I'd argue that all of them have been pretty equal, in my opinion.
Yeah, I love what you're bringing in. There's so much here, because you're right. What is the so I'll just sort of chalk through my thoughts in sequential order. It's so interesting because when you first started bringing in, for example, Ariana talking about her vagina, or the times where she's talked about her mental health issues, I noticed my first response was, well, yeah, that's true. But also my experience of that at the time was, oh, she is carefully curating what she's willing to show. And I remember, and this was like way before Scandival and way before these conversations, I remember real time watching it, feeling like I almost was a little uncomfortable with it at the time, because I was like, I feel like Ariana is almost commodifying her mental health struggle for a TV show. It's like, and by the way, kind of like with Sheena, totally believed the mental health struggles. I'm not saying it was false. I don't think it was false at all. But I felt like it was being used in a very curated, cultivated way to have a storyline for the show, and being dealt with in a way that was for camera purposes, as opposed to like really going on the deep journey. So I noticed that was my first response, which, by the way, and I still stand by that. But then when I really sat with what you were saying, though, I was like, but to your point, don't they all cultivate stuff for the show? So you're bringing up really interesting questions, and I guess I'm accepting your invitation for me to look at my own definition of what's raw and real. Again, without discounting my intuitive impression of what was happening, because I do think there is a relationship that Ariana has to control that I would say she
Absolutely
doesn't own consciously, and that's going to trigger people. Much like any of us, we all have things that we disown. We're all sensitive creatures and we can feel it. You know what I mean? And so stuff's going to get agitated in us. Now, that doesn't mean it's our place to then take something out on someone. So that's where the cast members lose me. I can empathize with their frustration of Ariana, quote unquote, having gotten away with this for so many years. But where they lose me, obviously this is mostly unconscious for them, is that they then funnel that into a demand on Ariana of like, you got to do this. You got to like sit down and have this conversation. And if you don't, we're pissed. Like, that's where it's like, okay, this is you getting triggered. And this is you wanting Ariana to tap dance for you so that you can avoid whatever this is bringing up in you. So it's an interesting line, though, like you're saying, who is to determine if all of them are choosing what's shown on camera, which ultimately they are, right? I mean, even like if we take something that's more raw and real, I think like James putting his family stuff out there, that has felt very raw and real and emotional.
Yeah.
But it's still a choice on his part to offer that up to the camera. And there are things I'm sure, I mean, there's murmurings about it that James keeps off camera. I'm sure there are things they are all keeping off camera. So to your point, why is it so triggering when Ariana does it as opposed to the rest of them? I agree with you 100% that they're, about the timeline and that we are watching Ariana go through something devastating in real time. And that's why I'm saying I am in support of Ariana. Anything that I bring in terms of sort of questions or curiosity about where she's energetically coming from, it's not coming from a place of criticism or judgment or she should be doing anything differently, right? So I agree with you that we're watching something settle in real time. And I think that's what was part of what was so exciting to me about that final scene, where it was almost like you had these people saying, because Lala says something at the end where she's like, look, it can be so healing when you live your truth on camera. And essentially what I heard her saying was, by virtue of having to face things head on, by virtue of being on a show where essentially the bread and butter of the show is to have uncomfortable, real conversations that maybe normally you wouldn't have or you would avoid, there's healing in that. And when she first said it, I was like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I can see that. But then what I realized, I was like, but Ariana is saying something so important here. She is saying the conversation with him wouldn't be raw and real. It would be a performative bullshit conversation. And she was claiming a truth in that. That's what was so thrilling to me. And then I kind of stopped and I was like,
yes.
Well, could she have sat down with Tom, let's say, and everything she's saying to the producer, everything she's saying in an interview, say it directly to him? But then I was like, but I get what she's saying. I mean, this is my interpretation. What she's saying is, she doesn't know how this is going to play out. And this is part of the reality TV game, right? It's not in their hands. And what I kind of heard her saying is, Tom is really good at doing what he does. He's creating this redemption tour.
Yep.
He's very manipulative. I don't know how this season's going to shake out. If I sit down with him and have this bullshit conversation, even if I'm in my truth of saying, no, I don't forgive you, no, you're performative, I do not know how this is going to play out on TV. I am protecting myself here. And that, I mean, I'm getting chills as I'm saying it. That's where I'm like, yeah, I think that's part of why I found it so thrilling. Because I was like, even though it's maybe her old pattern of shutting something down, withdrawal, I experienced it so differently. Because to me, it didn't feel like control or withdrawal. It actually felt like a really clear boundary of, I know where this can go and I'm taking care of myself. And what I love about it too is like, obviously Ariana didn't know that her confrontation with the producer would air, but I love that they included it, because to me, it's like, that was the vocal expression of what she didn't want to give to Tom. Like, there's something she just claimed for herself there and reclaimed for herself that I just thought was so exciting.
It was so real. Yeah, I don't have much to say because I feel like you just nailed it. And I got chills at the exact same time you did, because it was like, the way she was speaking to that producer was so clear. It was so pointed. It was from her soul. There was nothing like hindering her. She was looking him in the eye. She was telling him the truth. She was like, this is my truth, but I never in a million years would have thought what you just said, which is, you're so right. Back to her control. Yeah, she has control issues. That's pretty clear, right? But you're so right. She knew, and you're so right on this. She knew if she sat down with that man, that somehow he would be able to do, because I always think of him as a magician, he would wield the audience against her. And and he would have, I guarantee it. That's his superpower. And she knows it, and she's not having it. And she also said multiple times, like, he has never tried to talk to me outside of the camera world. And I actually think she's deeply hurt by that. Like when she's speaking of him and trying to explain herself to people, like every time I feel like she has to explain herself to people, I can see her pain. Like, why should I have to explain this to you? Like, I'm telling you, I'm living with this person. He's inauthentic. He's not here for the right reasons. And there is something in his eyes this season where I just see this disconnect. And I think human beings like have to survive. Like they have to survive so they can float out of their body when they're in a trauma state and believe the lie that they created in order to survive their own psychological warfare that would be going on. But I think she's really she's really connected to her soul more than she ever has been. And I think she's starting to see that there is a way out for her. There's finally a way out. I think this has always been a prison that she has chosen to be a part of. And to your point, 110% was extremely strategic in how she presented. And maybe that was smart. I don't know. But I think she was also, and we touched on this in older episodes, but she also was like abandoning herself daily for the last 10 years. So I think she's probably at a breaking point of like, I'm not going to abandon I was talking to a wonderful therapist about this, and she said, there's nothing worse to feel than when you realize you've abandoned yourself. Essentially, like, that's why this pain for this woman is so deep. I mean, she's like, I abandoned myself for you. Now, he didn't ask that of her. She did that. And so I would imagine that she's so firm and staunch right now because she never, ever wants to do that again. But yeah, to your point, I never would have thought of that. You're so right. Like, she knew what she was going to get. If she let that man sit down and talk with her, everybody would have been like, do you see how sweet he was? Do you see how cold she was?
Yeah, she didn't want to give him the opening, like you said, to weave his magic. Yeah, there's so much. I love what you brought in about her heartbreak of having to explain herself. And, I explored, I think it was actually in the episode with you, and I'm feeling it again, this notion of just feeling so left behind. And then in the context of this episode, though, it's like the voice I'm hearing is just sadness that this show is more important to you than me.
Wow.
Like this show is more important to you than me, than my well-being.
Wow.
Yeah, it feels really deep. And again, just that notion of like, why am I the one who always gets left behind? And then, bringing in the heartbreak of Tom, like just feeling so used by this guy. Again, I've explored this in previous episodes, so I won't belabor it. But, just again, feeling that empathy for where this is taking her. I want to say something else about Ariana, but just to quickly touch on what you said about Tom, and maybe we need to go more into him, but oh my God, yeah, his eyes, like they're dead this season. They're dead. I don't see anything in them. And then you can see certain moments too where I think actually, like one example is when LVP, always getting in the mix, when she revealed on camera that Rachel had said on the phone that Tom told her life is about lying or something. If you go back and watch that moment, his eyes, like you literally just see his eyes go dead. Like there's this shift in his eyes where they just go dead. And then, he kind of throws a little fit. But I just say all this because it's fascinating to me whenever they flash back to older episodes, or if I happen to catch an older episode. I know there are people out there who they subscribe to the idea that this is who he's always been and he's just always been super manipulative. I mean, yes, he has always had a relationship to being manipulative.
Yeah.
Even when they flash back to older scenes, I'm like, I experience him so differently. I can feel him. I can feel his energy. I see life in his eyes. He's present. He brings something energetically to the show for me. This season, it's like, I know I said kind of earlier in the season, I was like, I can't feel Ariana. Well, now I feel Ariana. I don't feel Tom at all. I never feel him this season. He just feels like an empty vessel to me. So maybe there's more we can get into, but I just wanted to co-sign your reflection about that deadness in his eyes. But the one other thing I wanted to say about Ariana connected to all this is like, for me, I just feel, I guess in a way, this is restating what's already been said, but I just want to say it so clearly and succinctly because it just proved so true in this final episode. Her clear, direct, powerful no is so fucking strong and powerful. And where it really stood out to me on a micro level, and then I'm going to talk about the macro level, is that moment. Remember, so I've talked about it before, when Tom came over to introduce himself to Dan, and it was so embarrassing and cringeworthy. And Ariana handled it by just kind of looking down at her phone and not engaging with him. I remember watching it just being like what I wanted for. And again, I want to say she can do whatever she wants to do. It's not a judgment, but I could feel the part of her, I think, that wanted to just look up and be like, Tom, get the fuck away from me. Like, I've told you, I don't want to talk to you. I don't want you around me. You are violating my boundaries. Like, I wanted that for her, right? And it was painful for me.
She did that though, remember? She did that when they were at James's house, and she kind of got
no, I know, and I loved it.
Crucified for it. And she knows she'll get crucified, right? Especially by Brock.
All right, well, maybe that's true. I'm saying it's Jamie.
Yeah.
I loved it when she did it at James's house. And what I wanted for her was to do it again at this party. But the reason why I'm saying this is like, yeah, to your point, like the way she channeled that to the producer was so powerful. And also going back to the macro level, I just have this feeling like, again, my sense is if she knew she was going to be okay, she probably wouldn't have done the show this season. So I feel like when I talk about my experience of something sort of murky happening at the beginning and not quite knowing where I stand with her or where she stands with the group or what's going on, to me, I kind of almost interpreted that as like, I think in some way, again, I'm not judging it. I understand why she would go back to the show, but I think she may have been betraying that strong, powerful part of her that was like, I'm done with this show. I'm out.
Oh, yes.
But how great for her that this season, it seems like, has been a vehicle for her getting more unapologetically connected to that strong, powerful no. And I want to say, I really support it when reality TV people are able to walk away for these shows. I think that's such a fucking powerful, badass thing to do to find that inner strength. I think it's amazing that Rachel didn't go back to the show. And, I'm not like, as far as a TV viewer, it's not like I'm a huge Stassi fan, but one thing I will say, I've so respect she didn't go back to the show when she had the chance. I so respect that she said no to the Valley. And I so respected Ariana at the end of this finale kind of saying, I'm done. Like, I'm out. Like, you guys, I'm not giving you the show that you want, and I don't need to. So essentially, F off. There's something about that because I know this is, we're talking about the state of reality TV.
Yeah.
I think reality TV, I've said this before, I'll say it again, regardless of whether she's a problematic messenger or she has mixed motives, I think there's a lot of truth in what Bethany Frankel's been saying with this reality reckoning. I think these production companies and these networks have a lot to answer for in terms of how they treat talent. And to me, there's something thrilling about when talent kind of takes back their power and says, you know what, Matrix, I am not dependent on you. I am not a slave to you. You cannot rattle my cage and gaslight me. I'm out. In the words of Jenny Garth on the old school 90210, I choose me. I'll sort of leave that there.
Yes, I love we're having all these 90s references. I think you covered everything there. I don't have anything to say about what you just said, except when you were speaking about the women finding their powerful no's. And I was just thinking of Ariana and Katie, and they both have been through pain. And you really see the pain that Katie's in when Schwartz does his little stunt. You really see how much he wanted to stick it to Katie again, and he did. And he got to watch her pain because he likes to see her in pain, and she was in pain. I think that both Katie and Ariana and their behavior this season are really kind of a bigger conversation, because I know I've talked about this show with like a bunch of different types of people, men, women. Everybody has a different view, and some people really hate Ariana and Katie because they're so strong, and other people love them. And I just feel like it doesn't matter what your opinion is of them so much, but of how do we respond when people find their no? And it's everything you just said, right? It's like, we're watching these people on a journey that have been on the show for most of their adult life. And like you brought up at the very top of this, to tie it into the top, when you talked about Lisa luring these people in, not only did she just lure some random people, but people who all were creatively inspired to maybe be famous, right? It was a very specific group of people that she very...
In LA.
Yeah, in LA. And whose, drug of choice is to be seen and heard, right? And validated. And so, now they've grown. We've seen them kind of grow. And I think that while we've been watching them, their values have changed. And we saw them as like, you don't know who you are in your 20s. Like you're acting, we're all acting a fool. And now they're grown-ass people. They're now like my age, I'm 42. And here they are. And Katie and Ariana are strong in their no, despite all of the pushback. And I would say lack of support, really, from the cast in general. Like people are like, I don't think people respond well to women having a no without making them a bitch or a villain or a this or a that. And so I think it's been even myself, I noticed like, oh, are you allowed to be that firm? people are going to hate you. I remember thinking that when I was watching, I was like, oh, if you're that firm, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get, and it's kind of just like fun to watch these women just be like, nope, nope, not having it. Nope. I mean, it's powerful. Like, I mean, I know a lot of women are able to do that. And I know, but I just know that for me, whenever I've done that, I've kind of gotten in trouble or told that I have too many boundaries or that I'm too strong or a bitch or this, that, the other. So it's just been kind of interesting because I feel like you summed up what you were saying perfectly. And this is the only thing that was left for me was just the world's reaction to boundaries and the word no and people being firm in their convictions. Is like, on one hand, they're always saying like, be real and tell the truth. But then when they do, if it's not the truth that people want to hear, they might get crucified. And I just feel like we're living in multiple realities within the show, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, I feel like that's part of what I've been witnessing in the collective, where it really feels like what Ariana is embodying, especially in this last episode, it's clearly tapping into something very, I'd almost call it very primal, I think, for a lot of women. And obviously, I'm aware I'm speaking about what I'm witnessing from the point of view of a guy, but that's my perception of it. It reminds me, I'm old enough to remember when Thelma and Louise came out in theaters, although I was young, I was young. But it reminds me of that. I remember the response to that movie, and the way that it clearly tapped into something, a rage that was so unspoken and unexpressed for a lot of women. And then I also remember, oh my God, I remember. It's so funny to think about now. There would be dueling op-ed pieces in the newspaper, where men were writing about, there were a lot of men who were just so appalled by it, which I'm just laughing because I'm like, I just sort of love the reactivity. Like, if you are having this experience of feeling alienated by this expression, which, by the way, if you watch the movie, it's actually very steeped in humanity and vulnerability. But let's just say it's an example of female rage and vilifying men, which again, I don't think the movie actually does do that, but let's just say it does that.
No, God, no. Brad Pitt.
Well, Harvey Keitel. He's the compassionate, voice of, empathy for them. Anyways, even if, let's just say you buy into this, what I think is a fiction, that the movie was kind of an example of overzealous female rage and vilifying men and this, that, and the other. It's like, why can't you use this opportunity and your reaction, your feeling of the endangerment and the injustice and all this, to reflect upon what this inverted experience has been like for women all this time, to see them on the receiving end of aggression, violence, all these things. It's always just so funny to me when people get when people who are in the positions of power and privilege experience what it's like to suddenly feel subjugated in some way. And rather than taking that and using that as a vehicle to say, oh, well, isn't this interesting that now maybe I can have more empathy and understanding for people who've been subjugated all along, I'm instead just going to get really reactive and pissed in a way that if someone who's subjugated were getting pissed in the exact same way, I'd be telling them, oh, calm down. Oh, stop being so angry. Oh, you're playing this card. Anyways, this is me on a digression. It's just me confirming that it is very clear to me that Ariana is sort of embodying something. And I want to say, as a result, sometimes I poke around online just to take the temperature of sort of what's out there. And it does sort of seem like maybe there's one voice where it's you can't question anything that Ariana's doing, or else it kind of reminds me almost of what happened with Monica in Salt Lake City, where there was this moment, when it got into stuff with her mom, where Monica became suddenly the sort of symbol of anyone who had ever been violated at the hands of a narcissistic parent or a narcissistic personality. And if you said anything against Monica, it was well, you clearly don't know what it's like to be emotionally abused. It's well, maybe check that assumption at the door. But again, sometimes these, that voice needs a voice, you know what I mean? And sometimes we just need that space to let the battle cry be heard in this unmitigated way. I don't really know what my point is right now. I feel like I'm...
Yeah, you do. No, it's the larger conversation of what it is to be feminine as we move forward into a new era. I mean, it really is about what's allowed and what's not. And again, we're going back to I think that movie was in the 90s. Maybe we're healing something from that time, to be honest. I don't know. But I do think that that movie in particular it's like a fear center for the power of women. And there was a scene in San Francisco with Brock and Ariana that I thought was pretty profound, where Ariana was saying, well, men get to be angry. And he was like so confused by this. Like, when are men angry? And then it was like cut to them screaming, screaming, screaming. And I do think it was like, everybody was like, oh, they're having a tantrum. Like, and when the women do it, when Ariana was enraged and scary, I think they were all just scared. At James's house, Brock and those guys were like, whoa, that was not okay. And I think it goes back to mom. It goes back to mom. Am I safe with mom? And if women are screaming, am I like, it's such a primal thing, like being, I think people's relationship to women because of, we give birth to humans and all of that. And I also think, look, I think there's a lot of women who can embody just as much toxic masculinity as anybody else. We all have all of the energies within us. In fact, I even think that Lala's annoyed by these people having strong boundaries and knows, because if you watch her arc from the time she was on the show until now, like, she was completely gaslit by Jax, and she was treated in a very specific way for a very long time. And she kind of figured out a way to navigate through that. And I think she has a beautiful storyline throughout the years, to be honest with you, with who she's become and who she's becoming, but I do think, like, as you watch these women decide who they want to be moving forward, I think we're literally watching them decide, am I okay with letting people hate me so I could be honest with myself? And I think that's where Sheena's sort of on the fence. She just would rather be in the matrix, to bring it back to that, than to decide what her actual point of view is. That's kind of the nature of this whole conversation. It's like them deciding, am I going to be authentic with myself and maybe hated, or am I going to do what's popular? I think that's really what we're talking about, at least to me.
Yeah, I mean, Sheena just feels so scared to me.
Terrified, like a child.
Yeah, whenever I look in her eyes, I just see so much fear.
Yeah.
But before I do, just so it's not lost in the shuffle, not that I have much to say about this, but I just want to co-sign your perception of what Schwartz was doing. I mean, it's funny because I was a very early Schwartz detractor, and he almost triggered me the most of everyone on this show for several seasons because of his passive aggression, his cruelty, his gaslighting Katie. And then it was almost like, I feel like in the wake of the divorce, he's become kind of such a sad sack on the show. And then, hearing the murmurings about what was going on with his family, it just kind of, I want to be clear, it's not that I was suddenly a Schwartz stan, but it dropped me more into my empathy and compassion. But that moment where, again, I was like, oh, this is interesting. Here's Schwartz playing producer. He's producing something for the show. We're here to have uncomfortable conversations, right? And you could take it on that one level. But to your point, the cruelty, it felt sadistic to me. The way that and by the way, it wasn't just about poking at Katie, but the way he used Joe to do it. I mean, we're having this conversation about grooming, right? That grooming came up in the reunion last night, Tom grooming Rachel. Well, it's like Schwartz kind of seems like a little bit of a Joe groomer as well. And then it wasn't just the pleasure he seemed to be getting out of poking and hurting Katie. It was it was classic Schwartz. This is what this man has been doing through the whole run of the show. When Katie has feelings about it, by the way, speaking of awesome, empowered moments that thrilled me, because, as I've explored before, I go back and forth with Katie. Sometimes she gets mean and she loses me.
I know, me too.
But that moment where, I don't know if it was Joe or Schwartz, I think it was maybe Joe who said, like, I want peace or something. And Katie just said, I don't want peace. I was like, I loved it. I was like,
and Lala rolled her eyes. Yeah.
Because I was just like, that's your truth. Like, it was just so clear and I fucking loved it. I was like rooting for her. I was just like, go. Like, if that's your truth, that's your truth. And what I loved about that moment, it's like, you didn't have to insult her. You didn't have to get mean. There was nothing mean about that. It's just, I don't want peace. This is my boundary. I fucking loved it. Anyways, coming back to Schwartz. So Katie, starts having her response to what Joe did. And nowhere in that scene, well, except when she called her weird. Other than that, like in the aftermath, I didn't feel like Katie was getting.
She was so hurt.
Yeah, there was nothing that she was doing that was really out of line or anything. And Schwartz, the way he's just like, what? I mean, I don't remember specifically what he was saying, but like, I don't get it. Like, she was just coming over to make like, you could tell he was trying to get her to have an oversized reaction.
He loves
it.
So
he could then use it against her. And I was like, this scene, I mean, it's amazing how Sandoval and Schwartz are just telling on themselves over and over and over now. It's like, that scene to me was a microcosm of their whole fucking marriage, where Schwartz does something passive aggressive to get a reaction. And then the second he gets the reaction, and there's this underground cruelty to it.
Yeah.
And then the second he gets a reaction, he points a finger at her.
You just said that both of them, they're telling on themselves, right? And I just wrote a song about after the Weinstein thing, and I'm watching this Kevin Spacey thing, and it's like, society protects the perpetrator. The way the system is built is to protect the perpetrator because it was built by perpetrators. Like, that's essentially, I was writing a song about this because I remember I was told that after I had a horrible incident 10 years ago. And I was like, what? And you're sort of seeing it in this show. Like, eventually the person who's the bad guy, but he's also the structure by which society's built. And so eventually we want to like him again. And they are still getting away with it. And this is just like the Weinstein case and the Kevin Spacey case. It's like all these people coming forward. It doesn't matter what the truth is. It doesn't matter what they did. It just comes down to like, do people like these guys still having power or not? Which I think is very fascinating.
Well, I do think it's fascinating. It's interesting because I have been seeing stuff about people really being enraged at Lala and Sheena, for example, because of what you're speaking to, this notion of and production, saying, production is set out for a Sandoval redemption arc and you're all playing into the patriarchy. And it's interesting because to me, this is, I think, where the difference between the conscious and the unconscious comes in. I mean, for me, do I believe that there's a conscious intention on the part of production or Sheena or Lala, for example, to side with the man and protect the perpetrator? No, I don't believe it's conscious, but I think that voice is important because of exactly what you're saying. It's baked in to the system, right? So I think we're watching something unconsciously play out. That is important to note and to notice. And I think that is part of why there is this huge rallying cry in seeing Ariana break out of this matrix. Because to your point, it does feel like, even though there's something sort of, it feels like dark and twisted and ugly about watching it play out in this unconscious way, we are still watching it and it is being clocked. And there are people saying no. And the conversation is changing. So I just think it's really interesting. And I mean, we don't have to go into this right now. And in fact, I'm going to do it, you guys. I have this really deep intention to finally do a Lisa Vanderpump episode, but it's interesting. Like since last year when Scandoval broke out, I've just had this voice in my head being like, where is Lisa Vanderpump in all of this? Where is Lisa Vanderpump in all of this? Because it's literally called Vanderpump Rules. But, I know there's been a lot of talk about Lisa's possible misogyny, her relationship to the men versus the women. So it's interesting to me.
She benefits from it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's a sort of a lot here. But when I hear you talk about the way the show becomes a potential microcosm for the way that society at large protects the perpetrators, where my mind starts going back to is like, where does Lisa Vanderpump fit into all of this? You know what I mean? And then suddenly, I am getting ahead of myself because I want to save this for her episode, but I am thinking all of a sudden about, there was a rumbling in the news about an employee who sued her and Ken for being sexually harassed by a manager at one of the restaurants. And there was rumblings about Ken destroying surveillance footage and Pandora saying things like, she was lucky to work for us. Speaking of Pandora, there's rumblings about her husband doing some sort of sexual harassment stuff. And, I don't want to peddle and gossip. This is all alleged. I don't actually know what happened. But it's interesting to me that all this stuff is kind of in the field of a show called Vanderpump Rules. So anyways, it's food for thought for now.
There are rules. Cannot wait for that episode. Honestly, I really love this whole conversation. I love that we're talking about the show as a mirror to what's going on in the world. And that's why I love listening to all of your podcasts. And that's why I keep coming back. So I feel very excited about this whole episode. It's actually like gelled for me. What I needed it to gel because I was so confused by that last finale. So now I feel a little bit more like, okay.
Is there anything more that wants to be said about Sandoval and his role in this and his role in the finale?
So when we were talking about his eyes and you were saying that they felt dead to me, it was funny. I also experienced him in previous episodes and up until now is like being passionate, very much an actor, very much performative person always, but ultimately more grounded than he has been this season. I've noticed his eyes go up like he's in the mental plane only and he's just not here on earth. Like he has left his body. That is really what I get. And I do think that is like a trauma response. And it's like, look, his unconscious behavior had him leave a relationship in a very nefarious way, which led to the downfall of how his identity is viewed by himself and the world around him, which has led him to feel like he is not safe within his own being because he attacked himself through his own actions. So when you feel attack is coming from within the house, as they say in like horror films, and you're living in that world, you don't trust yourself and you can't ground into your body because it's a battle zone. So I feel like you'll notice his eyes go up a lot, like he's reaching outside of himself for an answer of how he's supposed to be. And, I will say one more thing about people love to diagnose everyone as a narcissist and this, that, and the other, which is fine. One of my best friends has got her PhD in psychology and they don't diagnose anyone unless they've actually been in session. Like you can't technically diagnose, you can, but like an ethical therapist would not diagnose with multiple, right? And so it's so funny that we live in this world, which is very much all about diagnosis 24/7. But Sheena's talking about him doing nice things and everyone's talking about him being like a guy who does things and the value of a friendship. But that's also such a trait of a narcissistic personality is that they typically run like nonprofits. They typically are like, they have to be perceived in a certain way. They have to be sort of cultivating beauty and making sure that they look like philanthropists and people who truly care. That's very much a narcissistic trait. And again, when you think about like that type of personality, it's from somebody who doesn't have an identity outside of how they're perceived, very similar to Sheena, to go back to your point of their energetic connection. It's like they don't know who they are outside of how they're perceived. And that's a really scary place to be, which is why they're both terrified to be in their own body.
Oh my God, so much is happening for me. So one thing I just want to say before I forget, because I love how you keep talking about, in a sense, this notion of how I'm perceived and how I'm perceived on some level defining my experience of reality and what's real, because I always like to make parallels to spiritual concepts. Well, actually, this is physics. And actually, I don't even know how to talk about this because I'm not educated enough about it. So maybe if there is a listener who can explain this to me in really simple terms, I would love it. And maybe I can revisit this. But I know there's something in physics and quantum physics about that notion of like how a particle behaves when it's observed, and that the actual fact of observation somehow impacts the behavior and influences the nature of reality. And that's just what I keep coming back to whenever you talk about these people. I call reality TV the simulation within the simulation. It's like that notion of how people perceive me defines my reality, aka the reality I'm presenting on the reality show, aka the reality that we're perceiving in the reality show. So I just want to name that because, as I say on this podcast, I always just have this feeling there's something about reality TV to me that just, like I say, it's the simulation within the simulation. I feel like it's embodying something very deep, and I feel like I'm onto something here. So if there's someone out there who knows about this and can explain it to me in very simple terms or lead me to good references, I would be very appreciative. What I also want to say, oh my God, there's so much I actually want to say. I'm glad we're kind of uncovering Sandoval. When you were speaking, when you talked about him, oh God, I'm suddenly getting sad. I've also noticed how his eyes go up so much. And when you talked about him leaving his body and you talked about trauma response, As people know, I'm always looking at everything that happens in our lives as like reflection of pattern in some way. And I just found myself suddenly I just had such genuine curiosity. I heard this question in my mind in kind of in an intuitive way of the question being, what the fuck happened to this guy? Like what happened to Tom in his childhood? And, and I've listened, he did a podcast episode with Dr. Drew where he talked some about his past and he talked about, some of his formative experiences. He talked about his parents' divorce. He talked about stuff. But when I heard you speaking, Molly, and again, this is always my caveat. I don't know Tom, never spoken to Tom. He's not here. This is purely just something intuitive that moved through me that I would be curious about if I could talk to him, that I would ask him about to see where it led. I just got this feeling. There's something, I want to say, it feels to me like there's something he's either fully repressing or he's not fully repressing, but he is not consciously identified as like, this had a huge impact on me. Like something he's either repressing or minimizing. Because when you talked about trauma response, presumably I took that to mean like in response to Scandival, but it just kicked something up in me of like, something happened to this guy, something happened to this guy. And it's interesting because beloved friend of the podcast, Piper Sample, I remember we were once talking about Vanderpump Rules just privately. And I'm suddenly remembering she actually once asked a similar question where she was just like, what happened to this guy? Like kind of really energetically taking in the depth, of his disconnect, of all the shit that we're seeing. So I just kind of wanted to name that I feel the presence of something here that feels so, I want to say dark and underground. And I feel like there's some sort of trauma he has not let himself know for himself. Having said all that, I guess there's just a couple of things I'll say, and then again, we can just sort of see if you have a response. But sorry, let me just gather myself for a moment. It's interesting to me because it's like, sorry. I think I just like touched something very deep. Yeah, do you see what's happening with my jaw right now? It's like tensing. It's like, I think, I just feel like I touched something really deep and I'm just feeling it for a moment. So look, again, we don't know if I actually did touch something or not. I am inclined to believe I did just because I don't usually feel this type of stuff unless I am. So I do like to say, even though hopefully Tom Sandoval will never hear this, he doesn't know we're doing this, I do think when we kind of potentially see and witness these deeper things for people, that it can still have a healing effect for people. It's part of why I do this. So I just kind of want to name and acknowledge that, like, I don't want to bypass what's happening in me, which is like something, it feels like something just happened.
Yeah.
And I'm also, as I say that, like, I'm just aware that we're bringing in bigger themes of the collective, protecting the perpetrator, the impact that has on, the people around us, and yesterday's victims become tomorrow's perpetrators, and then the systems that get set up around that. I guess I'm just naming all this to name the bigger picture, because I always have this feeling too. I mean, look, it doesn't take Dr. Freud to figure it out. Tom clearly has a very tormented, conflicted relationship with women. And so I'm not going to speak to the flavor, because I did kind of get a hit of something. I'm not going to speak to that because there's just no way to know whether it's true or not. But, that there may have been experiences.
It could be anything. You are an intuitive. So when you're tapping into somebody, you're feeling your jaw's tensioning. And I kept thinking of the word the cage, which I felt like the cage has been surrounded. Like, I always felt like Tom and Ariana felt like they were in a cage in this show. And I think that Tom's very used to cages. And I think that when it comes to like something happening as a child, it could be something traumatic for real, like really like intense, or it could be of witnessing it happen to somebody else. It could be anything. It could be even when I have voice students come in every student has like vocal trauma. And it could be something as simple as like a kid made fun of them once, or somebody like literally told them the worst thing ever and told them never to sing again. Like, but the reaction to it is the same. Like, the reaction and how they respond for the rest of their life, or how the reaction that they have to their voice or whatever. In this case, I do think like he definitely shows signs of like sex and love addiction, right? So it's like his reaction to women could have stemmed from a magnitude of things, but obviously there was something that affected him early on that you're tapping into that is still being played out.
Yeah, so I'll just sort of use that to transition to, because I was so taken by those last few minutes, I did drop into Tom towards Ariana, actually towards Sheena when Sheena said, Ariana said, you're performative. And what I got off him, I mean, it's very much like what Ariana was saying. It's like, you want me to be the final boss in the video game. You want me to be a cog in your redemption tour. Him realizing she's not going to give it to him.
Yep.
And it's almost like in the way that I think one of the things they had in common in different ways is they do. I mean, we've talked about this. Both have a relationship to control. Both have a relationship to power and how they wield it. And as Tom, it kind of really felt to me like she's getting the last word, and it infuriates me. Like she's winning the game. Like she's making a power move and she's going to get away with it. And the fury and like the voice I just really heard in him, it was like, you don't fucking get the last word, which to me, I just feel like, and then it just hit me. I feel like this is so much of what plays out in his relationship with women. It's interesting because I was way back when, I don't know if you remember this or if you followed this, there was a moment in time where Rachel got back onto social media. I think she posted like a birthday post and he commented on her post like, happy birthday, Rachel, or whatever, hope you're well. And then she blocked him, which I loved. But I remember I was going to do a video on Tom towards that comment he left on her Instagram post, because you got to remember, this was before the season aired and it was before Rachel had her podcast. So none of us really knew what had happened with them or where they were at with everything. And what came through me was when I didn't end up making this video, but when I kind of like was preparing, it was the same exact thing where my attitude or the energy I picked up on Tom towards Rachel was, I get the last word, you don't. You don't get the fucking last word, I do. And what's so interesting, again, it's like noticing the pattern in him. I could feel the control and the power move of, I'm going to leave this message publicly. Because at that point, he could have DM'd her. I'm going to leave this publicly as a little kind of like, fuck you, because if you have a response, everyone's going to see it. Kind of like what maybe he wanted to do with Ariana in that finale. Again, that's kind of what I love about what Rachel did, which is she kind of reclaimed her power by, like, she didn't engage with him in the comment section, but she posted a story of his blocked account. And then she wrote something cheeky like, okay, bye. You know what I mean? She kind of was like, to me, it was a sort of a version of what Ariana was doing, which is just like, I'm calling this out, and I'm not playing your game.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying this because I just experienced Tom as really having this relationship to this notion of, I get the last word. You don't win, I win. And it really does feel like this power struggle and that rage from him. And especially kind of to the point that we were talking about earlier, when I felt into it, this sense of, I've watched Ariana do this. I feel like this was his experience of the relationship of, you get to shut things down and maneuver and control things and you get away with it. I feel like somehow that was part of, I've talked about how it felt like he had so much rage by the end of the relationship, and that affair in an unconscious way was actually a fuck you. And this feels like part of the flavor of the rage of like, you fucking think you win. You think you get the last word. You think you get to control everything and get away with it. Guess what?
Yep.
I get the fucking last word and everyone still fucking loves me.
And he did.
Well, not anymore. And that's the last thing I'm going to say about this. What's fascinating to me about this, it's like when Scandival first broke, and there were people who said, this, Tom's always been a narcissist. Everything he's ever done that's ever been nice has been an act and a manipulative tool of narcissism. And I was kind of like, no, I don't believe that. I mean, I believe there was a lot of mixed energy with everything he was doing, but I'm not reducing him to just a stereotypical narcissist. But having said that, the Tom I see this season, I am like, you have become, in my mind, everything people were accusing you of always having been. Like, that's what he feels like to me this season, where his attempts at like managing everything he is doing on camera this season feels 100% motivated by wanting to rehab his image. he feels like a hollow vessel of himself where everything he's doing has an agenda. And I guess maybe this in some way maybe confirms my hunch that he hasn't always been this way, because I'm kind of like, you're really bad at this. For someone who's so manipulative, you're actually really transparent. Everything you're doing seems so heavy-handed and obvious. I don't believe a word of it. And so it's just interesting to me, like, I don't know, the performance has taken over the show, where he just feels like a caricature of like his worst qualities. And like we've watched him. I agree with you. I've been very clear about this. I do not diagnose personality disorders. I don't like how comfortable people are doing that. But we're going to go with the idea that there's some sort of personality disorder brewing. If they're progressive, I feel like we're watching him step into it. I feel like we're watching him, like, kind of to your point, leave his body, lose himself, just go past that point of no return.
Well, and I think what I really believe is what I said earlier, which is that he attacked himself. And when you realize that you've attacked yourself and it's not a safe place within, it's a scary place without, right? And let's also keep in mind, he is somebody who is used to having somebody there. He is used to having a grounding force. Even if Kristen wasn't grounding, it was, even if these people were grounding or not grounding, quote unquote, he always had an ally. And even Schwartz is all about optics as well. So Schwartz isn't really an ally, or we don't even know if Schwartz is always on the fence in every aspect of his life. That's not really a grounding force for him. Tom is now, I don't think if he did have a personality disorder, I don't think it's something that people are aware of and like actually like, oh, I'm going to use my narcissism in this way. It's very unconscious, right? And if it's something that that they've developed in order to protect themselves, then they need to protect the mechanism that started. And, the way I look at Tom is he just wants to be seen as the good guy. And when he says at the end, she talks shit about you, all of you, well, guaranteed he was having those conversations with her and they were all dissecting their opinions on everybody. At some point, everybody was talking about shit against everybody. But this idea that he needs to be seen as the good guy seems to be what I see drives him the most. And his disconnection to his own soul and his disconnection to his own heart right now is so extreme. Because I think along the way, I don't think he's been connected to his heart for a long time. Like, I actually don't think he has been for a hot minute. But I do think that he was more grounded before because he had somebody else to go home to who was maybe grounded or grounded him somehow. And now that he's on his own, well, I think you're right about he needs the last word. I think you're right. When I said at the very last sentence of the episode was him saying, well, it's good for me. It works for me that she left because we're narrating this as a bad thing, that we can't believe Ariana abandoned the show, even though it was like the most real thing ever. And he says, well, it's good for me. He still had the last word. It's good for me tells you everything we need to know about this man, because it says it's good for me, makes me look good. I'm the good guy. She's the troublemaker. I don't know.
And that's what's so interesting is he thought he had the last word, but then he didn't really have the last word because the show outed him, which again, it's so fascinating to me that the show chose to show that last sequence. It's almost like, I feel like, again, speaking about the conscious versus the unconscious, I think in the show's mind and production's mind, they were just trying to present an even-keeled kind of like lay of the land of where everyone was coming from. But in doing so, I feel like the show kind of told on itself. So again, if we're looking at this as a reflection of what's going on, like we have the perpetrators telling on themselves. We have the system that consciously, unconsciously, whatever you want to say, protects the perpetrators telling on itself. So it does sort of feel like there's a change and an evolution here. But I think the last thing I'll just say, when it comes to Tom is it's interesting because as the machinations are becoming so embarrassingly embarrassing for me, I get embarrassed for him. It's like,
yeah,
I experience the way his mind works is so, in a way, surprisingly emotionally immature. Because I feel like in past seasons, I mean, again, part of what I liked about him is there were times where he seemed more emotionally intelligent than a lot of the other people. And I want to say, in terms of what you were saying, part of why I responded to him in earlier seasons, even though it was clear there was a lot going on and there was stuff brewing under the surface, I could feel his heart before. I don't feel his heart anymore. And by the way, that's happened to me with people in real life.
Yeah, I could feel his heart. I don't think he was like always like there would be certain times where he was driving from his heart, but I felt like there was always a driving force that he chose above his heart. I'm not saying he was completely disconnected to it, but I think the driving force that I saw a lot of times was about how he was perceived and making sure that he balanced both.
Yeah, no, I'm not disagreeing with what you said before. I'm just sort of adding in my 2 cents that like I could feel his heart before, and now I just don't even feel it at all. But what I was saying was, it's like when I hear him say things like, she doesn't show up for you, I show up for you, like AKA I get my sound guy for you, I fetch you water after the show. I'm just like, and it reminds me also of how his version of a happy relationship like last season was, I want to go hang gliding with you. I want to do shrooms with you in the mountains. It's almost like that aspect of him, I experience it as this emotionally stunted place where something stopped developing in him, you know? I don't know what age it is exactly, but again, it's I don't know, to me as we're sort of feeling into this, it's just this feeling in me like, something got stopped somewhere along the way in him. And it's just really interesting to see it laid more bare as the magician is losing the power of whatever kind of invisibility cloak he had before and whatever protection he had before.
That's exactly right. What you just said at the end is how I feel about him. It's like, I agree that I just felt like even in like the first seasons, like I thought he was a compelling, interesting, grounded individual. You know, he's from the Midwest. He had a level of like knowing who he was and having strong convictions. And now I feel like he is in full flight from any connection to any part of himself. I just think that over the course of the years, he became less and less connected to his heart and all that stuff. But what you said at the end really nails it for me, is that the magician is losing his powers. And that's exactly what Ariana is saying is about the boss and the video game and all of this stuff, is that like the tactics, and this is a tower moment in the tarot, right? Like this is happening in the world. And it recently happened for me. Like if you're awake and aware, you're going to wake up to your own delusions of how your old operating system that was built out of fear and sometimes trauma created certain mechanisms of how you are in the world that no longer work for you. And when you wake up to realize that they no longer work, you're already at the funeral. And I've just posted about this because it was like, when you wake up and see clearly, it's over. So you're at the funeral. So now you have to grieve that. And I don't know if he has the capacity to be still enough and move slow enough to grieve, because he's always trying to like spin the narrative and come up instead of just like be silent, be still, which I think Sheena actually, to her credit, tried to give him that advice actually. But like he doesn't have the ability to be in his body silent or still. And if you don't have that ability, then it's going to be very difficult for you to grow or change. And so, like you said, he's a magician who's used to having 4 resources, the 4 elements at his disposal. And those elements have all, to your point earlier, become a simulation for him. They are no longer tangible. They are no longer real. They maybe never were. And so now he's picking up these instruments and they're not doing the same thing they used to do. And like you said, he's a child who just doesn't know how to reparent himself, hasn't reparented himself, probably needs to be reparented, probably wasn't parented in a way that he specifically needed. No shame on his parents, just saying most of us aren't. We all have to learn how to give ourselves what we need as life progresses. And most of that journey goes along with forgiving your parents and knowing that they're exactly as they're meant to be because they created you and your experience. But I think of him, again, going back to what you said about him and Sheena having similar energy. I see them both as a terrified child who want love and go about really weird ways of trying to get it. And it's not working. That's how I...
And also, by the way, Sheena is also someone who needs to have the last word. I mean, you mess with Sheena, she fucking messes with you, and she does it with a smile. I won't get into examples now, but like, I remember she gets very cutting.
To your point, in the last episode, there's a cutaway to her, and she's got a drink in her hand, and she says, "But that's just me, making it about me." And it was actually like, ooh, Sheena's a badass. Katie shows that side of herself all the time, but Sheena pretends she doesn't have it, but there it is.
Oh, yeah. I felt like, to me, when I saw that interview, but I was like, oh, this was clearly filmed once the show had started airing, because she's speaking to audience response about how she's making everything about her. But yeah, that's a classic example. And I think, the last thing I'll kind of bring into this, just in terms of this energetic spiritual connection between Sheena and Tom, I just feel when I dropped in to Sheena towards Tom, like I said, part of what I was feeling was like a genuine feeling for him. Part of what I was feeling was wanting the show to continue. Part of what I was feeling was wanting the audience to be okay with her. But I felt from Sheena, there's that moment, right, where she's saying, Tom, like, what do I mean to you? Is this for the audience or is this for filming? Which, by the way, I have to assume she didn't know that would ever make it to air. So I think that was a genuine question for her, in the place where I think she likewise blurs life in reality TV / filming. But what I really felt was this part of Sheena that really she wants to go back into a relationship with him. Like, I could just feel it. And it felt to me almost like, yes, for all the reasons I just said, part of her cares, part of her wants the show to go on, part of her wants to be the producer's pet, all of these things. And I also just felt, it's like the expression, a moth to a flame. I kind of, when I took Tom in as Sheena, I could feel his relationship to the darkness, and I could feel this part of me that likes it. Like, there's something that Tom and I as Sheena, we kind of have in common there. Like, there's something we both, I'm saying no in quotes, like, I think unconsciously, but there's something we both know about the dark side. There's something, I'm smiling as I say this. So there's something we both know about giving in to something. There's something we both know about navigating the shadow world. It's interesting. There's rumors coming out online now, like Sheena may have had another affair with another married actor when she was young, before Eddie Cibrian. Again, who knows if this is true, but it's like, oh, this is the femme fatale in Sheena. And like I said, when I dropped into her, I just felt the presence of there's something Tom and I both know, and it feels really good to connect with him here, even if we never talk about it. There's a way in which I feel like there's an unspoken understanding between us. There's something that, I just feel like there's something we understand about each other that, like a moth to a flame, I'm always going to want to go back into. And then as I'm saying this, it's even what we're talking about. Part of it's this addiction to the reality TV cycle. It's like, when you're choosing to gossip with someone and you just let yourself give into it. It's like, let's just gossip. It's going to be fun and it's going to feel good. That's kind of what it feels like. Like, I want to go back into this with Tom. Like, he holds something for me and with me. I'm feeling it now as I speak. It just feels so fucking good. So I'll leave it at that. All right, Molly, I feel like we covered a lot of ground. And I guess I like to just say this for record now. We're recording this, I don't even know what the date is, like May 16th. So Reunion 1 aired Tuesday night. By the time this is released, we'll have had a second part of the reunion, and that's where this is falling into context. All right, Molly, thank you once again so much for being here with me. I love what you bring. It helps me so much. Tell people where they should find you.
Find me. I'm at Molly Durand on Instagram. I am a vocal coach and singer in Los Angeles. And if you want to liberate your vocal journey and love the voice that you were gifted, hit me up at mdvocalstudio.com. And my band is Lyra and the Light. And we have an album coming this year, and it's all about the feminine archetype. So you guys will love it.
Okay, great. And as always, you can find me on Instagram, Jamie Stein, JAMIESTEIN. I have exclusive Bravo related content there that you won't find anywhere else. And if you are interested in what I do and the possibility of navigating your own unconscious realms and psyche for deeper information and who you're meant to be in this lifetime, I will put a link in my show notes to a little form you can fill out to let me know that you're interested in working with me, and we can always go from there. All right, everyone, that's it for now. I will be back soon with more. Thank you for joining me. I will see you on the flip side. Bye.